So just watch these in double speed because I'm not going to edit them. And so you're going to see all the awkward moments of me staring at the whiteboard, trying to figure out what to say or what to write next. Those periods will probably happen fairly often because I don't like using lots of filler words like, yeah, I don't like doing that. I just stare and pause and think about what I'm going to say. I still say filler words sometimes, but usually not that many. So just watch in 1.5 times speed or something like that so you can get more out of it. There might be a few cuts here and there when it's especially egregious, but for the most part, it'll be unedited, which means it'll be a little bit more entertaining probably as well. All right, so I don't know why I'm talking about this. This is just the next topic that came to mind. We're going to be talking about science-based lifting. There is nothing wrong with science-based lifting, except the community. I say that half facetiously. I am mostly not joking. There are plenty of science-based lifters who are excellent. Dr. Mike Isertel, pretty solid. Jeff Nifford, also pretty solid. Chris Bumstead, pretty good lifter. I must say, he's gotten pretty swole, like competitively swole. He's pretty good. He's a science-based lifter. But there's other people who claim to be science-based lifters, and they are quite small and have no idea what they're talking about because they mix up theory with outcomes. So they think, all right, science says this. Science says the stretch is important for hypertrophy. Right? Doing reps in the lengthened position is going to produce more hypertrophy than reps in the shortened position, right? Well, there's studies on that. There's lots of studies on that. That means the stretch is important, right? Well, yes, but if you measure the full range of motion in a lot of different muscles and across, just in general, full range of motion, including that shortened position, produces just as much gains as only doing the lengthened portion, which means just doing full range of motion is at least as good as lengthened partials. But full range of motion comes with other benefits that just doing lengthened partials does not. And if they're both the same in terms of hypertrophy, why would you ever only do lengthened partials? If they produce the same amount of gains, but you get more benefits on top of hypertrophy from doing full range of motion training, wouldn't you want to do full range of motion training? Anyways, small rant there. The stretch is important. Okay, cool, the stretch is important. Maximizing the stretch means maximizing gains. Ooh. So, there's a small amount of evidence for this, which is why this came to be a theory in the first place. Except that it's not true in all circumstances, and I would say that's even not true in most circumstances, right? The preacher curl has your biceps in front. Your biceps are less stretched when they're in front of you than when they're behind you. right here my biceps are a lot more stretched, which means that if I'm doing curls in this position, it should be better than doing curls in this position, according to the theory, right? Except when we look at the two, we look at the outcome of the two, we find that doing curls in this position provides just as much gains, muscle building, hypertrophy, as doing in this position. Huh, okay. So that means something about the theory isn't correct, or something about the study isn't correct. More likely to be something about the theory, because that's occurred in multiple studies. The outcome doesn't match what the theory says should happen. Okay. Usually it's not like one's better or worse, it's they're both the same, right? Another one. Resistance profile. Resistance profile needs to match the strength of the muscle, right? Or it needs to be, exaggerating so that the hardest part needs to be in the stretch position. People argue that the reason preacher curls produce just as much hypertrophy as incline curls is because in incline curls, the bottom half of the rep is kind of easy. But in preacher curls, that's the hardest part, right? Which means preacher curls have a good resistance profile, but a bad stretch. Incline curls have a good stretch, but a bad resistance profile, so it cancels each other out. So they're both about the same. So if we could find an incline curl that does both of these things optimally, that would be even the better, right? Then we discovered Bayesian curls, which is you're doing cable curls like this. And so supposedly they have an optimal resistance profile with maximizing stretch. Except, once again, there's been no demonstration that they're actually any better than other forms of bicep curls. Therefore, something about the theory is wrong. Or we just haven't had enough good quality studies to test the theory effectively. Now, a lot of good things have come about from science. For example, the rep ranges, right? We used to think rep ranges 1 to 5 for strength, 8 to 12 for hypertrophy, and 10 to and then 15 to 20 for endurance. No, that's bunk. 1 to 5 is still for strength, but anywhere between 5 and 30, 35-ish reps, if you go to failure, produces hypertrophy. Great. Which means that you can do 5 reps and stay underneath 7, 8 reps for all your sets. Theoretically, you will get as much gains as is possible, right? That's cool. Science has demonstrated that time and time again. That's pretty well researched, pretty well documented. Makes sense. That's cool. Science has shown us that. That is a theory, and we tested the outcome of that theory, and the outcome demonstrated the theory to be true. We tested it a bunch more times. Outcome demonstrated the theory to be true. These two things are theories. We don't have enough studies to conclusively say whether or not they're true or not. And there's so little evidence that we really can't say that they're true at all, except in some circumstances. And in other circumstances, they're not true. Probably, right? That's the thing. This is all a big game of probably. So when you get science-based lifters who say, hey, this is a scientific theory which has a little bit of evidence from one study. That doesn't mean anything. It's one study. Meta-analysis, that means a little bit more, because a meta-analysis looks at a bunch of different studies and says, all right, what can we glean from all of these studies? That's what a meta-analysis does. It does a little bit more than that, but that's basically what it does. So, if you want to be a toxic science-based lifter, so not sebum science-based lifter, but toxic science-based lifter, Don't look at the outcomes. Just look at the theory. Ooh. So what does theory say? Theory says your grip hinders you from lifting as much as you possibly can. So if you can eliminate the grip from your lifting, your muscles will be able to work harder because you're not limited by how strong your grip is. Therefore, you should remove your grip entirely. Okay. I mean, it makes sense. That's why people wear straps on deadlifts, right? It's because their grip gives out and their back gets, and then posterior chain gets stronger than the grip is able to handle. So they wear straps to accommodate. Makes sense. Theoretically. Oh, but here's interesting. To maximally use the muscle, to maximally activate the muscle, to recruit the muscle fibers, you need to be gripping something. Grip something. So, people will use cuffs. So their grip is taken out, right? So they've got something holding on. And they've got a chain. And they're doing curls. But they're holding on to a handle. So they've got a cuff and they're holding on to something that isn't attached to the chain that they're lifting. So they're gripping something because grip has demonstrated that if you're gripping something tight, you're able to recruit more muscle fibers. But they're not gripping the thing they're supposed to be gripping to lift. They're using a cuff to circumvent the grip requirement, but they're still gripping something. Okay. If this is true, I guess it makes sense. It's so... Woo, okay. It's just, people unironically do that, you know? They just hold the thing, you know what I'm saying? Just grip just hold the handle. Oh my word. Sorry. Back in character. Seatbelts. I'm sorry, it's really funny. No, sorry. It's very funny how outlandish this stuff has gotten when you really look at it. Seatbelts. All right. So I wish I was joking about this. This can actually be useful in some circumstances. Would I ever use it? No, I would never use a seatbelt for lifting. Can it be useful? Sure. People have used it. People bigger than me have used it. So it can't be useless, right? If people bigger than me have done it and used it efficaciously, I'm sure it works great. Sometimes. Basically, if you have to hold yourself down to be able to lift something, right? Or to be like for leg extensions, you have to hold yourself down. You're using more muscles than just your legs. And that's hard. And you're using other muscles that aren't your target, what you're trying to target. So that's extra fatigue you don't need. We're trying to remove as much fatigue as possible and only have mechanical tension. We're only trying to target the muscle we're trying to target, nothing else. So now people are wearing seatbelts, leg extensions, and leg curls and other things so that they don't have to hold themselves down nearly as much. So that they can go harder on their isolations. So that they don't produce as much fatigue. Okay. That's interesting. Now, have any of these things demonstrated that, like really, with really solid evidence, that they work? No. This whole theory, based off of single studies that have spawned other theories. These are all maybes. These are all possibilities. None of these are rooted in outcome-based science. They're all rooted in theory-based science, right? That's what I said was a little bit of a misnomer. They're all rooted in theories that are not backed by lots of studies. They're backed by like maybe a questionable study or two. And then when they actually study these things, it's like, oh, it doesn't actually matter. Now, these things are new enough, there's not really any studies about them, so these things still exist as ideas, as theories. Maybe it'll get disproven sometime in the future. But the point with everything that I've been saying is that this is the problem with science-based lifting, is they're focusing on theory so much it's at the expense of outcome. They're not looking at outcome-based science. They're not looking at the things that have been conclusively proven to be true. Or more conclusively, at least, because nothing's really truly conclusive in science, right? Nothing's absolute in science. That's what makes it science. Except, like, the laws of physics. That's the only thing that's absolute ground truth. Everything else is theory backed by observation. Problem is, these things are backed by so little observation, it's That's the problem. It's pretty simple. That's the problem with science-based lifting, is people focus too much on different theories and not enough on the outcomes, on the outcome-based studies. Now, why are they focusing so much on the theory? And that gets into the real root of the problem, because everything that I mentioned is, the symptoms of the problem. That's how it's manifesting. This is getting a little bit more into psychology. Arguably, this is a tangent. You can click off the video now if you feel so inclined. Motivation. What is their motivation for clinging onto theory so tightly? It's a shortcut. Shaft cut. It's a shortcut. It's easier. Makes them feel superior. Makes them feel smarter for doing things that are science-backed, based off of theory, the cutting edge of knowledge. And it's easier. If you're trying to avoid fatigue at all costs while trying to get enough mechanical tension in, you're going to be avoiding hard things. The deadlift is hard. Like, it kind of sucks. It takes a lot out of you. It's very fatiguing. But it's also been shown to be very effective for, building strength, building muscle. Is it the most effective? Not necessarily. For some people, it seems like it is. For other people, it's not. For a lot of people, it's not. I didn't like the deadlift very much, but, part of it was because I was really bad at it. I'm still really bad at the deadlift. But I'm getting better at it, and I'm beginning to enjoy it a little bit more because I'm getting better at it. So, I said the deadlift was bad because it made it easier for me to feel and think that the deadlift was bad. Once I started getting better at the deadlift, the deadlift's it's better now. Anyways, if you look at these science-based lifters, who are the toxic ones, right? They're doing things to try to make them easier, right? Lots of isolation exercises because they want to avoid as much fatigue as possible, stabilizing things as much as possible to try to, isolate the muscle as much as possible and not use other muscles as much as possible. All the stabilizers. You don't want to use the stabilizer. I don't know. They want to feel superior. They want a shortcut. And that's the problem with that's the difference between the toxic science-based lifters versus the real science-based lifters. Jeff Nippard's not looking for a shortcut. Chris Bumstead is not looking for a shortcut. They're science-based lifters, and they're not toxic science-based lifters. which means that they don't fall into the same traps that the toxic science-based lifters do, even though they're arguably looking at the same things. It's because the motivations are different, right? The reasons for why they're doing what they're doing is completely different. The toxic science-based lifters are trying to find ways to work less to get more out, or to work the same and feel like they're getting more out, even if they're, getting out less. There's some pretty small science-based lifters who swear that they're doing everything right, and they're just really small, and they'll blame it on genetics or something like that. It's like, oh, if you're doing everything right, how do you know your genetics are bad unless you weren't doing everything? It's because they're trying to find shortcuts, because they are not used to actually doing hard things. So they fool themselves into thinking they're doing hard things by actually doing easier things, but saying, hey, science tells us these things are actually better, even if they're easier. And then turns out the science they're using to refer to is just not outcome-based, and it's just theory, right? So at the end of the day, what makes the science-based lifting community toxic is their motivation. It's not the fact that they're based off science, because science is great. It's the fact that they're trying to find these things, and there's probably other motivations they've got, but they're motivations that cause them to do things in deceptive ways. When I say deceptive, I don't mean they're trying to lie to people. I mean they're lying to themselves, and they don't even know it. That's how deceptive it gets. They don't realize they're looking for shortcuts. They don't realize they're trying to make things easier. They're rationalizing the crap out of what they're doing to the point that they believe it themselves. They believe that what they're doing is better. They believe that what they're doing is superior. They believe that their methods are the best ways, even if their methods are producing less results than things that they say are worse than their own methods. And then they blame their lack of results on things outside of their control, like genetics. So that's it. That's why the science-based lifting community is so toxic. It's just filled with a bunch of people who want to feel superior or want to avoid hard work and use science to hide behind as a giant shield. So it's not science that's the problem, it's their motivations. They're hiding behind those things. The science is just a symptom, and it's just the scapegoat for the toxicity of the science-based lifting community. But I have a solution. I have a solution that might take a little while, but the more people that do this, the more the solution will sink in. And the solution is to subscribe. I just mixed a capital in there with a bunch of lowercase. That's terrible, isn't it? It looks awful. But anyways, you should subscribe anyways, even though I can't write to save my life.